Hi, this is the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting focused on kubeadm upgrades, bootstrap tokens, self-hosting, and extensibility. Today is the 16th of August, and we have a couple of status updates and things to discuss on the agenda. Yeah, let's get started. So first, we can talk about kubeadm upgrades, and I currently have a PR for review, and it's too big. I know that. We should discuss how we can layer it up in the best possible way, and I'm really happy to hear your suggestions here.
I think just having the apply first as the first one, the default, and then adding the other options as a second PR seems tenable from what I've seen in the code. But I'm open to other ways that you'd want to do it. But right now you have to eat everything all together, which is a bit much to swallow. I've made the same comment on your PR too. Because I started going through it, but then there was like comments along the way. I'm like, what does dry run and yes mean together? Like, I was confused by that, right? Also, why would there be a yes on apply if you already have the separate plan phase?
So it was more like, like apt-get or whatever, like always, if you do an upgrade of any kind, you have to specify like the Y flag if you want it non-interactively. Otherwise, it will like go as far as like, okay, this version is okay. I know the cluster is healthy. Everything seems fine. But then ask the user, are you really sure you want to do this? And let them type in yes or no. And then like so it doesn't like a final confirmation. Just I think it's what
I'm okay with like completely leaving out yes for this iteration, and then maybe adding yes later on. I don't know what other people think. I just think it's because it's the first version that we're adding upgrades into. I don't think we want to have the YOLO option, but
yeah. So I mean, I think it. Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry, I think having a way to run it non-interactively is important, because there's going to be certain environments where there is no shell. So someone's running this command not by opening a shell on the master and actually running it. They're putting it into, like AWS has a command scheduler where you can run a command, but they're not going to be interactively able to, So I think if we do that, somebody's just going to work around it in those kind of scripts to, type yes into it or whatever.
So I don't think it's that much code on, like, it's mostly an if clause or something.
I think it's to get the plan apply kind of UI right. The place I've seen this go through several iterations is Terraform, which I think is what we modeled our plan verb on.
Kind of, yeah.
They've gone through a few iterations of how their CLI works. The latest version, I think, defaults to when you run apply, printing out the plan, having you confirm. So you don't necessarily always run plan ahead of time in their model. You can run just Terraform apply, and then either the default, which is to ask you, or you can force it no, which means I just want to generate the plan, I don't want to run, or yes, meaning I want to generate the plan and then run it without confirmation. I don't know if that's just dropping the plan verb entirely.
We can't do that because there are like at maximum 4 different releases you can upgrade to at any given time. Like, so I mean, it could be like you are on 1.7.3 and you can upgrade to 1.7.5 and you can upgrade to 1.8.3 and you can upgrade to 1.9 all for one or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. So that's where we have this split. Like, plan is like, get me what I can do, and then apply is actually do it. And I've already chosen one thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense to like start with the plan command. If you're okay with that, Tim. It has the basic, like, just ping the API, so make sure it's healthy, then load the in-cluster configuration, and output available versions to upgrade to.
So with regards to some of your other dry run stuff that's stubbing out the clients, there's so many different incantations inside the repository of different either client stubs or API server stubs or hooks or other things that allow you to do this in the testing. It'd be nice to have one canonical example. I realize that might be hard, but a lot of the testing infrastructure already has similar pieces of this. I could point you to specific references where they basically start up API server hooks, not necessarily in the client. You've kind of stubbed out a fake client, right? But they stub out a fake API server entirely, and then the back end of those pieces. But it's all automatically configured. They have helper functions, utilities for all of it.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. If it can handle the use case I want. I mean, there are two modes of getting. I mean, it discards all updates, and I mean it discards all modifications. But in one case, we want to get fake values like on init, so you can do kubeadm init dry run, and it will just like print a fake Kubernetes API, a Kubernetes service object, and a fake node that it has registered, and these things. But in like the upgrade scenario, we actually want to target the actual values of our cluster and forward just get and list to the actual client, the actual API server that's running somewhere, and not fake them, but still discard all modifications. So this was basically the best thing I could come up with. If there's a like canonical way to do this, I mean, I'm happy to throw away that. It's if we have a better way of achieving the same thing.
Let me take a look back through your PR one more time, the dry run. You have two separate PRs, both have dry run in it, but the one you asked me to review yesterday, and I started taking a look through it, but the context of having that piecemeal integration was lost on me when I was reviewing it. So.
Oh, yes. Sorry for not making that clear. So yeah, it basically, I mean, there's one function, get dry run client or something, on new dry run client, where you should pass an interface that's called dry run getter, and that interface can be used. Like, there are two implementations of that interface. One is for init, that just does whatever is like required to get init working, and the other is like actually redirect my gets and lists to a real API server.
Okay, I'll take a look through it again this morning.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So that's one of the dependent things. And then we have, I encountered while doing the upgrade PR some weeks ago now, must have been. Well, actually coding it the first time, I encountered race conditions in the self-hosting code that basically, when we create the new like self-hosted variant, then we wait for the self-hosted pod to come up. Everything's fine so far, and then we remove the manifest from the static pod, and right after we listen for like, is the API server healthy? But there's indeed a race condition there where the API server, like when we're checking, is it healthy? Well, then we check the old one, because kubelet is slow to react, hasn't had time to like remove the static pod thing. But that happens like in between. We check, is the API server healthy? Yes. But it's the old one. then we go proceed and like apply the controller manager daemon set 1 second or 2 later, and then the API server is gone. Like it's now restarting in this state. So I've sent a PR to wait for like the deletion of the static pod before actually proceeding and getting the health of the API server.
You can also wait for the other one to be running. If it's running, because you submitted it through the main API server, so you have that main hook, you can check to see if the pod is actually running. If it is running, then delete all things.
The problem is, there are like, we already check if it's running, but it's not running. So it basically just, it's up and running, but it's back.
Check health and liveness,
Yeah. We could do that, but it's hard to tell. Is it like which API server am I talking to? Like both return the same on health C.
The endpoints, are the endpoints the exact same?
Yeah, unfortunately. They bind to exactly the same interface and all things. So I mean, this was so basically I'm checking like for every static pod there's a mirror pod, and I'm just checking that when this mirror pod is deleted, I know that kubelet has had time to remove it. And now I expect the self-hosted one to come up in like 4, 5, 10 seconds. So after it's deleted, I go ahead and like check the health endpoint of the real API server, the self-hosted one.
Definitely comment in the code.
Yeah, I have a 3-4 line block there. Yeah. Why we do it?
Quick question. So there's no way to tell the difference between the static pod and the self-hosted pod by making an API call?
Yeah, so the hard thing, we have access to kind of both, but although the self-hosted one reports like running, it's in the running state, but internally it's back offing like, oh no, I couldn't bind to the port. Let me wait 10 seconds again, and I'll try again. Then like, oh no, I couldn't bind this time either. Then I'm like 20 seconds, and on a given amount of time, I don't know exactly what that time is, it will like fail and exit one or whatever. And then, yeah.
The health Z and liveness have no concept, at least by default, of identity. Like some metadata that would, say like,
I wonder,
I'm alive, versus like Lucas is alive. We're just both alive.
So one way that you could think about solving this is to add another listening port on the API servers where they serve a health C. So that when that self-hosted API server comes up, it can't bind to the main port yet, but it can at least serve like an unhealthy health C on like an admin port.
Yeah, but
that would be a change to API server.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't do that at this point.
I've used that pattern in other kind of microservices of having a separate admin port for exactly this reason, because you have 2 copies of your app. They want to share the main port because they're going to do a handoff, but you need the status of each of them individually.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that's the best we can do for now.
You can query the kubelet directly. The kubelet has a main API that you could query.
Yeah.
That gets pretty hairy to actually get the real local state. You would actually need to hit the running pods endpoint, which is a
debug.
No, if your self-hosted has an annotation or something that's different from your main manifest, all you have to do is when you query the kubelet itself, it would come back with that detail, right?
It would come back with the detail. I mean, it depends on what you're actually looking for, I guess. It would come back with that detail, but the actual status of that pod, whether it's actually running or not, might actually be pretty stale because that endpoint doesn't update itself unless it actually is able to persist it in an API. If the API is down, then it's not being persisted, so you don't get an updated state. So if you're just looking for a random annotation, that actually should be okay. But if you're looking for an updated pod status, you won't get it.
Yeah, I think this is the best we can do for now. And I've done quite some pauses, but yeah, go on.
No, just when in doubt, sleep 10, right?
Yeah, well, actually, that was the first implementation I had. But yeah, I mean,
does kubeadm do something after it does the pivot? Because in bootkube, we just, at that point, we know we've pivoted, so we just delete the stuff and that's it. We're done. And
yes, we just we start the new thing. We wait for the new self-hosted pod to be running. Then we delete the static pod. And now we wait for the static pod to be deleted. Then finally we check that the health C endpoint of the new API server must be okay. And then we go to the next one, kube controller manager, and so forth. And after that, it's just fine. I mean, proceed as usual. Then we have another, while we're on this topic, we have another fun race condition with a 4-line comment, which Matt actually commented on, I think, good documentation or something. So this is the case where we do the static pod switching. So let me just cover that quickly. How the upgrade works when upgrading a static pod cluster, we write new manifests to a temp directory. So we have everything's in the temp directory, and then we take one of the running, the running API server static pod, place it, rename it to another temp directory that's called backup, and then we move the new one to the actual path, and that will make kubelet oh, this is not the state I had. I will restart this new pod, and the new API server will come up in the upgraded one will come up in some minutes or so, seconds or so, and then we proceed with the controller manager. Well, of course, check the health endpoint and such things. Then let me see here. So the tricky thing here is, oh no, it was Jamie that commented on the comment here. I have a function called wait for static pod control plane hash change. So what I'm basically doing is I'm taking a hash of the pod object that was running, the static pod object that was running before, and when this is again because we don't have many good ways to do this. So let's say we're on 1.7 and we want to upgrade to 1.8. So in the beginning, we take the hashes SHA-256 or something, hash all these 3 manifests, and then when we have swapped out the manifests, so we have now the 1.8 manifest in the static pod directory, I actually wait for, instead of waiting for it to get deleted, it won't get deleted. Instead, we're waiting for the hash of the static the mirror pod to change, and then we know that this one has actually come up as a new one. Because again, it's really hard to get the identity. I mean, I would have loved to use UIDs, but it turns out after some testing that kubelet will not update the UID after just an image version change. It will use, because it has the same name, so it thinks it's actually the same pod, and it's getting this, everything's the same. So that's why I went with the hash. And then we can proceed. Otherwise, we'll get into the same race condition where we don't restart before we proceed. And yeah, so that's basically it. If we at any time, so we have the 1.7 manifest in a backup directory. If we at any given time like don't come up cleanly or something, get into a bad state, kubeadm will just move the backup manifests back to their original location and exit one. Any comments on that, like upgrade flow for with static pods, which we have to do for this, at least for this cycle?
A part of me wants to have like some, is part of the document that you're working on to have known limitations or something that exist regarding, or known issues or known conditions. Just because like right now, the code, reading it through, unless you have context, will be difficult to fully understand. But if it's written down in some tomb of knowledge, either in a README would be fine, honestly. A single README as part of the main feature list, right? In the main, underneath kubeadm. So whenever we have a split the repository, say like we've added this upgrade feature, here is the known list of things that exist with upgrades.
So what do you mean, like what kind of issue do you mean? This is like an implementation detail? I mean, this is working, right?
This is the way it works, right? And here are all the gotchas. Here is the flow of conditions that it goes through. Because right now, I think there's way too much magic boiled into your brain from experience that people trying to understand it, unless they walk through all the code and do it multiple times, would have no idea why it's that way, right? Like us spending earlier 10 minutes regarding why you need to have that timeout block without having it actually documented. You know, somebody's be randomly walking through the code, be like, why are we doing this? 2 years from now, and be, no, let's delete this section, and then everything breaks, right?
Yeah. So that's why I tried to like add a lot of comments there. But yeah, totally agree with you on the upgrades doc. Like have a flowchart or like just a bulleted list with like, this is all the steps we do when we upgrade, when we transition to self-hosted.
It's a behavioral DAG, right? A, then B, then C, then D.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna do that. For now, I don't think I'll have time to like upgrade the doc with all the implementation details, like the design doc or proposal before the freeze. But I mean, I guess that's why we're here. So like, I'll definitely do my best on documenting in the code and like being really transparent with all these details for these 2 weeks that left. Then we can like merge it. It's working well, and then like document for whoever reads this in the future. Sounds good. And yeah, so we have, those are two like tricky ones. Then we have a third, which is, or actually we have two more, which are heavily unit tested. I'm really glad that Go makes it easy to unit test in this case. One is like we run apply. We give a version, and then we have to make sure all policies, like can we upgrade to this version, are set. And there was many more when I actually started coding this and implementing everything. There were many more like edge cases than I had thought it would be. Like it seems things like just like if we are on 1.7 and specify I want to upgrade to 1.9, it should error out and say, well, we support only one minor version at a time. Upgrade first to 1.8 and then to 1.9. So that's one. Then we like don't support downgrades. So if it's like I'm on 1.7.2 and I want to upgrade to 1.7.2, it will say, no, you shouldn't do this. We don't know what will happen. But specify the false flag if you are really sure you want to do this. One case where it will be really useful is that it's idempotent, the command designed. So let's say you're upgrading from 1.7 to 1.8 and your machine shuts down while it transitions these static pods. Then you're kind of screwed. I mean, you can have one upgraded API server, and but the controller manager and the rest of the cluster isn't. And then kubeadm will say to you that, oh, your cluster is 1.8 already, you can't upgrade. But then you can use the false flag to just like force that through, and it will eventually work. So those policies then like validate that your kubelets aren't too old. Make sure that all these kinds of things, like you can't, if kubeadm is 1.8, you can't upgrade to 1.9. That's also one policy. Like kubeadm 1.8 has no idea what's coming in 1.9. You have to upgrade kubeadm first to 1.9 to be able to upgrade to 1.9. All these things. So that's one function called enforce version policies, and it has got let me see. It's got nearly 200 lines of unit tests. So I think that's and there I've like added all the edge cases I could just think of, and I mean it's passing. So that's a good one. And also we have the like what versions should I display, like given these flags in the plan command, like what should I tell the user? Right? We query the CI system, and we get like latest table is 1.8.3, and I'm on like 1.7.3. Then I should, and the latest 1.7 version is 1.7.5. Then I should show 2 upgrade possibilities to 1.7.5 and or to 1.8.3. And all these, and it's also heavily unit tested to make sure everything works there as expected. What else? Anything specific that came to mind? Other things? It would be pretty easy to just do the CLI first if you think that's good. I mean, just like stubs. Everything just I'm now gonna apply, and then I'm doing nothing, just exiting. But we'll have the like Cobra commands there. If you, I mean, whatever works for you in splitting this PR up. I mean, I've already split it up in like 7, 8, 10 PRs. So, but it's, I I mean, it was above 3,000, so needs yet much more. Tim, do you have any? No comments? You're muted, by the way.
Not right now. I don't really have comments. I'm kind of splicing two things right now too, unfortunately. So
yeah, I'm not sure who to direct this to. I mean, you're working on checkpointing. I'm working on these things. Matt is bootstrap tokens. Fabrizio has worked on the faces stuff, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, we have to do this in a collaborative manner somehow. So, but I mean, I could start with. I mean, that's easy for me. Like, just pick up the like CMD upgrade and just submit that. It doesn't do anything, just has the right flags and all that. And then we have 300 lines less code to review for the actual implementation that's in Faces upgrade. That's the actual code that does something. But yeah, so that was upgrades. Yeah, and dry run support. We have to like see if there's something in tree that can be used already. Otherwise, I'd like advocate for merging this and like improving later, whatever. If we find that.
Lucas,
yeah,
Fabrizio speaking. The effort on Phases is, I think, nearly finished. That if you need help on upgrade, I jump in. I try to help you. I contact you on Slack and I can do a review or whatever you need.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
I will contact you on Slack.
Cool. Yeah, so that's that. Bootstrap tokens. Matt, do you have anything?
So I don't really have status yet because I haven't really started on this work. But to summarize the feature, basically once we have self-hosting and HA, we're going to want the ability for a new master to come online and Bootstrap as a master. And we need to be able to tell apart the master from other worker nodes at the Bootstrap stage. So I'll be adding a groups field into the Bootstrap token object, so that when you authenticate with that Bootstrap token, you don't just go into the generic Bootstrap group, you go into a specific Bootstrap group. And I think the idea is that sort of in 1.9, we'll be using this to do self-hosting and HA. I think I understand how this is going to work, but I haven't started it yet. So that if we just get that Bootstrap token to authenticate you into like a master Bootstrap group, that group master Bootstrap group label will end up on the certificate signing request object that gets created.
Yeah. So basically, we need this like field to be supported in the authenticator to get the beta, and it should default like if auth groups or whatever like on the secret, whatever key you have is a nil value, like empty or not existent, it should default to system bootstrappers, like what we do now.
Yeah.
And then you can, I mean, comma separated list is probably enough structure, like, and everything has to be under system bootstrappers : and whatever your group is.
That makes sense. And then there'll be a little bit of follow-up work in the 1.9 release to change the certificate signer to respect those groups and sign different certificates for the master versus the workers.
So how this will work, we'll implement this already in 1.8, like it's a 2-line change. Basically, the approver is configured via RBAC rules. So we bind a cluster role called like node client or something, a long name and node client. We bind that to right now to system bootstrappers. That will make the approver approve every node client CSR coming authenticated from the system bootstrappers group, right? But we'll change this already in 1.8 to make only like system bootstrappers :kubeadm :node or something. We'll just change this string value and the binding, so that will work pretty well, I think.
Okay, so you're actually thinking that in the HA self-hosting world, when a new master comes online, it's going to be using its bootstrap token to talk not necessarily to the CSR API, but to the master directly to some other API that we'll be using to transfer the brains of the control plane.
Yeah, so basically, like, just a straw man is like, well, it's really useful to have a separate identity for the CSR API, of course, so it can get its real credential, but it's kind of equally worth for this, like, just get my files over case to like just make an RBAC rule, like the system bootstrapper kubeadm master can access the CSR or the CRD, right?
Yeah. I think there could be some benefit to still pivoting through a CSR, because you could get an individual identity for that node instead of the bootstrap identity for the whole pool of potential new nodes.
Yeah.
But I think, one common use case for this might be that the bootstrap token for that node identity might actually have individual bootstrap tokens for each. If you have like a fixed number of master nodes.
Exactly. So that's really like actually that's possible already. But yeah, so also it's like if you create any token, bootstrap token right now, it will be authenticated as system bootstrappers, which will automatically give it access, although I might not want to use the CSR API anyway, or I don't want to order approve this thing or whatever. So we want to like differ what kubeadm actually uses it for, and like the generic way, like if bootkube has some other security policies, they shouldn't like be affected by what we do, right?
I would also like this feature to work to unlock multiple worker pools that end up with different identities. So if you have like worker pools that are in different parts of your network, like internal versus edge nodes, that you might want to have separate workloads, and you want to sort of eventually run different workloads on those that are isolated from each other. You have to work back up the chain all the way up to this bootstrap step, give them different bootstrap tokens, so when they bootstrap, their CSR is marked with different groups. The CSR approver then needs to know how to like treat those groups differently and sign different kinds of certificates for each group, whether that's just the name on the certificate or something else. That's one of the groups that get added into the certificate identity. And then that needs to go into then new sets of ACLs on the node object, which Sigoth is talking about now, about restricting how much control a node has over its own node object in terms of labels and stuff like that. But I see this as sort of part of that whole chain. Like the very beginning is separate bootstrap tokens for different types of workers. And then the master is sort of just a little bit of a special case, but the same pattern.
That's just one use case that we already know we'll be using it for. But I mean, it's definitely a requirement to get the beta. So I don't think like code-wise it's that much to do. Just like remove the hard coding there. And
yeah, I just want to make sure I understood the requirement here and make sure I understand all the use cases.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I mean, Joe and I talked a lot about this like 6 months ago already, so it's like has been pending. But yeah, I mean, thanks for doing that. It's really helpful.
There's two other issues here under Bootstrap tokens. The next one was whether we should. So right now, when Bootstrap tokens come through the authentication chain, they just sort of get passed through all the token authenticators. The Bootstrap token authenticator is one of those, and it would be a little bit more precise if we had a prefix. So the Bootstrap token authenticator right now looks at every token request that comes in and looks it up to see if it's a valid Bootstrap token. It'd be a little more precise if we could fail fast if something doesn't look like a Bootstrap token, like maybe if it's a JOT, OpenID token, or whether it's some kind of custom webhook token. So this is it's not a huge performance improvement necessarily, because this stuff is all cached in memory, and it's not necessarily a security thing either, because if it's not a valid token, it's not a valid token. You're just saving you some lookups in your cache. So I don't feel that strongly about this. It got kind of a mixed review from some other folks. I'm okay dropping this if you are, Lucas.
Yeah, so after like seeing the actual plan, as Joe also said, nobody's excited about that migration plan of like 3 releases to get that work. I think definitely I take Jacob's approach from yesterday. I think that was good. Like, we have a really strong champion, like this needs to get done. Like when in doubt, right? So if we have someone really champion it, we can like consider it. But like Jordan is like meh, and myself and Joe and everyone is like, well, it would be nice from a correctness perspective, but it would lead to a lot of extra effort and actually no really performance gain. I mean, not many nanoseconds or something to check whether it's like this of this length, like what it's like 17 chars, and like matches the regex versus like strings has prefix. So actually, I'm starting to lean like towards just dropping this, and eventually maybe, but I don't think it's a requirement to get to beta, and we don't have unlimited time now either from before. Like I mean, well, should we say that we won't do this for now, and I'll check in with Joe just on Slack, or whoever can do that, and we'll just get buy-in from him and close the issue. Is that fine by you? Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice, but not that much. Then we have enable the Bootstrap token controllers by default. Here this is like a steering committee thing or SIG architecture, and I don't know really how to go from here. I mean, there is resistance against, and I mean, I'm at the same time I appreciate and respect the resistance there is, because I mean, we don't want to blow the core too much, and I don't either want to like add things we'll never use and enable that by default. It's just that I think, well, and it's also like the Bootstrap token authenticator isn't either enabled by default, and it's also an edge case where all the other authentication modules are enabled if you have specified the file, right? Like basic code, for example, or token. If you have the CSV file there, it enables the module, but Bootstrap tokens can either be like always on or always off. So yeah, I don't know. Matt, that's actually something I opened an issue for as well. Right now it's called experimental bootstrap token auth or something. We should definitely rename that. Just enable bootstrap token auth, which might be like useful to do. I mean, we have to do it before beta. We should. I mean, I may be able to do it, but if someone else could take it, I mean, that would be great.
I will take a look at it. It sounds like an easy change.
Yeah, it's
in terms of code. I don't know. Maybe one of those changes that generates a lot of discussion.
I think that's gonna go pretty smoothly. I mean, my 2-line change to enable the control S is non-trivial, but I think that one will be. We basically just have to make sure we don't break existing clusters. So, like one period where the experimental bootstrap token, like for 1.8, I think the experimental bootstrap token flag should take precedence over like the new one, enable, or something like that, and then we'll mark it deprecated and remove in 1.9. Does that sound good? And
yeah, we could just make it an error if you specify both flags instead of making one of them take precedent, and then maybe warn if you're using the experimental flag in 1.8 and tell you that it's going to be deprecated.
Yeah, so we deprecate it now and remove it as soon as the 1.9 cycle starts. I think that's really reasonable. Bootstrapping, checkpointing. Tim, do you have what's the time frame for code here? I mean, it's obviously, as you said, a lot of, or mostly communication, but
I'm gonna push for the checkpointing. So I'm gonna just push the PR the end of this week, as well as the docs community PR. I expect there will be kerfuffle from some folks, but to be honest, I think there's some massive levels of miscommunication going on, to the point where it's not productive, right? I waste absmacks of time, so I'm just going to push it, and we'll sort it out and talk with Yuju and Don at this point.
Well, also, I think you said yesterday that you got buy-in from Brian and some other.
Brian said that they're going to want to do it in the long term. Brian said that they're going to want to do it anyways. So having an alpha gated feature for initial support for kubeadm makes reasonable sense. So Dawn is okay with it. She's a little reluctant at how late we are in the cycle with everything, which I probably should have pushed everything earlier. But hindsight's 2020. I wanted to get buy-in from people, which was a huge mistake by retrospect. So I'm just going to go forwards and get it done.
Yeah.
And get the initial, because all we need is something very simple, and it can be expanded upon in scope, and there's nothing really earth-shattering about it. So.
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you. Aaron, I think Diego was yesterday at the meeting and said it probably was on track, like the add first, delete then thing.
Yeah, he's been stuck on some internal release stuff for the past couple of weeks, but he started looking at it this week, and I think the last time I spoke to him, he said he should probably have something by end of week. He was asking me about something to be reviewed. He was asking me about doing a design doc, because in the features repo, that's one of the check marks. I told him for now, just do code first, and if someone comes back and says there has to be a design doc, we can tackle that, but don't bother with it right now.
Yeah, I mean, we got I don't think there's a strict need to have the design doc at this stage. I mean, we got buy-in from SIG apps, right? And that's kind of what's needed. It's a pretty, functionally, it should be a small change.
I feel like the issue encompasses the design essentially enough. Yeah, but we can revisit that after the PR's in.
Yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, hopefully, I mean, hopefully we should have something at the end of week, because there will be a lot of movement, as always, like just before the freeze. It's always like this kind of graph. Then Tim, a heads up on the PR I just pinged you about. So here is the 50766 is about the self-hosting race condition would be, and it's also like I found some other bugs in the self-hosting code. I'm gonna split those two out. Currently, they are in the same PR, but yeah, in an hour or so, there will be two smaller PRs, which should be okay to review, and yeah, hopefully get the more trivial one in today, which is mostly like adding a timeout. So
sounds good. Just poke me when they're ready. I will hold off on 50766 till you split.
Yeah, that sounds very good. Yeah, I think. I mean, we have 1 minute left. I think that's one thing we should. I mean, I'll send a PR about enabling self-hosting by default. It's a one-line change, just like false to true. And I don't think we should merge it now, because we have to make sure like everything's. This is basically the last thing we enable before the freeze.
Do you have a single card checklist of all the items that we need to address for self-hosting? That would be. I know you originally had one a while ago, but if we had an updated checklist, it'd be nice.
Yeah, it's basically these 4 items. It's not updated like in the latest 4 weeks or so. I mean, it's nearly the same, like 60% or something. But I'll add these things. Cool. Bye. I think that's a wrap. Thanks everyone for participating, and see you all next week. Happy Wednesday.